What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to be doing a video I've been meaning to do for quite some time. And it's one that's probably not one that I've seen a lot of in other videos. And the topic we're going to be talking about today is issues that have been popping up on my 2019 Tacoma since I got it. Had it for about 5 years now, and there are small things that are starting to creep up just based on the build, size of the tires, and things that you might want to be looking out for when you're kind of just trying to make sure that everything is operating properly. And then I'll also cover just some minor things that you may or may not want to address that are a little less urgent. So with that, let's get into, let's say, maybe 5 to 10 things to kind of keep an eye out on when you reach about 50,000 miles on a 2019 third gen Tacoma. So probably one of the first things that I noticed, and again, one thing I will say in advance of all this is try to keep an eye on your vehicle, try to keep tabs on it. I know there's not a lot going under the hood under these Tacomas. They're notoriously slow. We probably don't pour too many performance mods into them, but really try to get a firm understanding of where your car sits before you kind of just neglect it for any reason. But anyway, the first thing that I noticed was as soon as I started putting new suspension on and bigger tires, I went from 33s to 34s, is the steering rack. The stock steering rack on the Toyota Tacoma is not designed to handle the size of the tires, the overall mass, the rotating mass of the tires. And so at some point, your rack and pinion may go out. Mine looks like it's starting to show signs of leakage. You can see here that it's beginning to seep out of the inner tie rod boot. And I've been kind of keeping tabs on it. It's a very expensive fix. I think the dealership quoted me close to like $3,500 just to fix, to get a new steering rack. I know a lot of people buy Tundra racks, which is a good option, but for this one in particular, if you have a heavy Overland built truck, try to keep an eye out on your steering rack because it's bound to fail at some point. And at this point in time, I don't think I'm going to fix mine just yet. Just really keep tabs on it and hope that it doesn't get any worse. The way you see it right now, it hasn't really progressed that much in the last year, but the more trips we plan in the summer, we do a few longer haul trips, and I want to make sure that everything is in good operating condition. So that's number one. So kind of in conjunction with the steering rack, one way to really know if the rack is really going bad and you have a real problem is if you look at your power steering reservoir and that thing is just sucking down power steering fluid. That just means that you've either already lost a lot or you're currently leaking from some other point. So I urge you to kind of pop the hood every so often, make sure your fluid levels are topped off as needed, and make sure, you know, while it's open, might as well make sure everything's clean, but make sure that that power steering reservoir is at the correct level for the hot and cold setting. The second thing here you'll find is that my, I think it's my camshaft is weeping. Right in here, where's my finger? You can see that there's beginning to be, I would call it seeping or weeping as the dealership calls it. They won't replace it under warranty, but you'll definitely want to keep an eye on that. I think that it just has to do with the amount of load that the truck has. Hold on, sorry, car's going by. Sorry, as I was saying, it really has to do with the amount of load that you put on the engine. And I've heard that it's something that's pretty common with these trucks. the dealership will cover it if it begins to leak, if you have a 100-mile powertrain warranty. But on mine, they just said it to keep an eye on it, make sure your oil level is at the appropriate level, and just really want to avoid any sort of catastrophic failure. So that's been also happening for the last year or so. So I know I said I would do 5 to 10 things, but I think the more I think about it, and I knew I wanted to address a few of these things before making this video, but the more I think about it, I don't think there's quite as many that I want to really stress. But the final one would be, so the third would be suspension components. The more weight you add to the truck, you got to start thinking about where the weight's being distributed, front and back. Tires, as I mentioned in a few other videos, rotational mass, how heavy is the wheel, how heavy is the tire, what does that add up to on all 4 corners. So definitely kind of keep an eye on those CV axles. I know that the angle can change a lot. I don't know if you heard me before I cut the camera, but oh my God, a guy was just sending it in a T-Rex. At any rate, yeah, CV axles. So my lift is about 2.5 inches with 34s. People will crank up all the way to like 3.5 inches, 35s, and you'll see their axles are just like 45 degrees. Mine aren't quite as bad. I'm not having any issues with them so far, but again, something that I really keep tabs on as much as I can, because I know that's a moving part that gets used a lot, especially during off-road, less so on-road, but something that you want to definitely consider keeping an eye on kind of while you're down there looking at the inner tie rod for that steering rack again. And then kind of in tandem with that would be the rear. I can't tell you how many trucks and 4Runners I see, especially older ones, that are just squatting like crazy. You want to make sure that your payload is not being affected. And what that is directly attributed to is your leaf springs. So right in here, you will be able to see the leaf springs. I'll flip around the camera here in a second. I recently swapped out my stock leaf pack. There's a stock bump stop that needs to be replaced soon. My stock leaf pack with the Add-A-Leaf with an Icon RXT heavy duty pack. And what that allows me to do is to effectively lift the truck high enough up so that its aerodynamics and overall functionality of how it rides aren't compromised. So that with, here, we'll scooch over here to the CV. You can see that mine are at quite a bit of an angle, but nothing too significant. Let's get in there right there. And you can see that there's no seeping out of there at all, inner or outer, for the time being. I'm sorry, I know I'm kind of dealing with some harsh winter California sunlight here, but I guess one of the final things, and I know I'm kind of going all over the place. Sometimes YouTube videos are organized, sometimes they're not. This one's kind of a little bit more thrown together. But I think the third thing, or excuse me, the fourth thing, is just going to be the plastics. They are Toyotas after all. They're bulletproof engine-wise, but a lot of the plastics, especially if you live somewhere with a lot of direct sunlight. I park outside in California. It's been about 5 years. They begin to fade. And you can use some polish to kind of shine that up temporarily, or you can go ahead and replace parts. But I think if you're like me, I always tell people my truck is good from far, but far from good. You step back 10-12 feet and it looks amazing, but it's something that each owner is going to be very much like. It depends on how dedicated to kind of keeping the rig as clean as possible. And in as good of working condition as they want it to be. For me, I just try to stay on top of it with some quick detailer. But yeah, the plastics on these are not great. And after 5 years, 50,000 miles, they begin to fade quite quickly. So just something to expect here. There may be 1 or 2 more things here in just a few minutes. So I think here, the fifth and final thing that I would say to expect repair wise of my own doing after 50,000 miles and kind of wheeling it, more so than someone who just daily drives your Tacoma, is checking your bolts. This is something that has happened to me with my rooftop tent, my bed cage or bed rack. It's happened with just small bolts on the suspension. The more you rock the truck back and forth on the trail, the more likely those are to back off. And so I'd always recommend, excuse me, to do a bolt check every so often, especially before a trail, before a long trip. This really only applies to aftermarket parts that you probably throw on the vehicle, although I have seen it happen on some bolts that are just part of the factory build of the Tacoma when it came out of the factory. So I definitely encourage you to do bolt checks, especially on, you know, accessories like bed racks, roof racks, awnings, things of that nature, because they will begin to seize, rust, anything like that. Even some of the parts on the truck are beginning to show signs of rust. There's just not a manufacturer defect. It's just because they've been on the truck for so long. So definitely something to consider and keep in mind. Boy, it's like rig central today. So we had the T-Rex fly by, and now there's the Bronco Raptor just ripped up this road here. So I'm kind of the slower, less powerful rig up here on the mountain today. I know this is kind of starting to turn into a random video, but hopefully you guys are finding this to be helpful. I know these are things that I would kind of want someone to tell me to kind of keep an eye out for if I wasn't already kind of meticulously always trying to stay on top of maintenance and, you know, making sure that everything's running properly. So if you have any other questions, or if you have things that I didn't address and you think should have been in this video, let me know. I'm happy to kind of address them in the comments, or when I do my next, you know, maybe 75,000 mile review of these types of things, I'll include it in there as well. So I think that should do it. Those are kind of my, whatever it was, 3 to 5 things that you could kind of be on the lookout for as your truck approaches that 5-year or 50,000 mile mark, especially if it's Overland built like this guy right here. If this is your first time here on the channel, welcome. Consider getting subscribed. Hit that bell notification icon. You can tune in to whenever these videos get released next. Consider giving this video a like, drop a comment down below. Be happy to answer any and all questions. And yeah, until next time, enjoy the ride.